I always thought I was the understanding daughter, the one who didn't need explanations, who could read between the lines when Dad would ruffle Adam's hair and say, "Your sister gets it, don't you, Rachel?" And I did get it, or at least I convinced myself I did. Adam was the baby, even at 22. He needed more guidance, more support, more of everything. That's what I told myself every time Dad missed my graduation ceremonies to attend Adam's baseball games. Every time my achievements got a polite nod, while Adam's mediocre report cards earned celebration dinners. The drive to Owensboro felt different this time. Maybe it was the way the autumn leaves seemed to mirror the unease settling in my chest, or maybe it was the phone call from Dad 3 days earlier. His voice had that strained quality it got when he was about to ask me to understand something else, to be the bigger person once again. "Rachel, honey, we need to talk when you get here," he'd said. And I knew immediately it was about money. It was always about money when it came to Adam. His car payments, his credit card debt, his latest get-rich-quick scheme that inevitably failed. As I pulled into the familiar driveway of my childhood home, I noticed Adam's truck wasn't there. Good, I thought. Maybe Dad and I could have an honest conversation for once, without Adam's presence shifting the dynamic. The house looked smaller than I remembered, its white paint peeling slightly around the window frames. Mom's flower beds were overgrown. She'd been gone 3 years now, and Dad had never quite figured out how to maintain the things she'd loved. I grabbed my overnight bag and walked toward the front door, steeling myself for whatever sacrifice Dad was about to ask of me this time. Dad opened the door before I could knock, his weathered face breaking into that smile that used to make everything okay when I was little. "There's my girl," he said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like coffee and Old Spice. For a moment, I let myself sink into the familiarity of it, remembering when his approval was all I needed in the world. But as he pulled back, I saw the guilt in his eyes, the way he couldn't quite meet my gaze. My stomach tightened. Whatever he was about to tell me was going to hurt, and we both knew it. "Come on in, sweetheart. I made your favorite, grilled cheese and tomato soup," he said, leading me toward the kitchen. The house felt hollow without Mom's laughter echoing through the rooms, without her gentle way of balancing Dad's obvious favoritism with quiet moments of validation for me. I followed him, noting how he kept glancing at his study door, which was slightly ajar. Papers were scattered across his desk, visible through the crack, and I wondered what financial crisis Adam had created this time that required my intervention. We sat at the kitchen table where I'd done homework for 12 years, where Mom had taught me to braid friendship bracelets, where Dad had explained why I couldn't have a car at 16 like my friends, because money was tight. The irony wasn't lost on me that Adam had gotten his first car at 15 before he even had a license. Dad pushed the soup toward me, his hands shaking slightly. "Rachel, you know how proud I am of you, right? How much I appreciate everything you've done for this family?" The words felt like a prelude to disappointment, and I braced myself for impact. "I know you've been saving for graduate school," he continued, not touching his own soup. "And I know how hard you've worked, how you've never asked for anything." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, and I felt that familiar surge of sympathy that had gotten me into trouble so many times before. I wanted to reach across the table and tell him it was okay, whatever it was, that I would figure it out like I always did. But something held me back this time, maybe the exhaustion of always being the one who had to figure it out. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of unspoken truths and years of accumulated resentment I'd never allowed myself to acknowledge. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking, the same dog that had barked through my childhood, a constant soundtrack to a life where I'd learned to make myself smaller, so Adam could take up more space. Dad's eyes were red-rimmed, and I realized he'd probably been dreading this conversation as much as I was about to dread hearing it. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to make it easier for him. "Adam's in trouble again," Dad finally said, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding his breath. I felt my shoulders sag with the familiar weight of my brother's latest crisis. "He owes some people money, Rachel. Bad people. The kind who don't just send collection notices." My spoon clinked against the bowl as I set it down, my appetite completely gone. 26 years old, and I was still cleaning up after my little brother's messes, still being asked to sacrifice pieces of my future so he could avoid the consequences of his choices. "How much?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Dad's face crumpled slightly, and I knew it was bad. Really bad. 15,000, he whispered, and I felt the blood drain from my face. That was exactly the amount I'd saved for graduate school. The money I'd scraped together working 2 jobs while finishing my bachelor's degree. The money that represented 3 years of eating ramen noodles and skipping social events. 3 years of choosing my future over immediate gratification. "Dad, I can't," I started, but he held up his hand and I saw tears forming in his eyes. "I know it's a lot to ask, sweetheart, but these aren't the kind of people who negotiate payment plans." Adam's scared, really scared. He came to me crying. "Rachel, I haven't seen him cry since he was 8 years old." The manipulation was so subtle, so practiced, that I almost fell for it again. Almost. But something in me had shifted during the drive here, some protective instinct finally kicking in after years of dormancy. I stood up from the table, needing space to think, to breathe, to process what he was asking of me. "Where is Adam now?" I asked, walking to the window that overlooked the backyard where we'd played as children. The swing set was still there, rusted and forgotten, a monument to a childhood where I'd learned to push Adam higher while never asking for a turn myself. "He's staying with a friend until this gets sorted out," Dad said behind me. "He's too ashamed to face you, knowing what we're asking." The word "we" hit me like a physical blow. Adam wasn't even here to ask for himself, to look me in the eye and explain how he'd gotten into this mess, to promise it would be the last time. He was hiding while Dad did his dirty work, just like when we were kids and Adam would break something, then send Dad to ask me not to tell Mom. I turned back to face my father, this man who'd raised me to be strong and self-sufficient, and wondered when those qualities had become weapons used against me. "What exactly did Adam do to owe this money?" I asked, crossing my arms. Dad's eyes darted away from mine, focusing on a spot somewhere over my shoulder. "It was supposed to be a sure thing," he said quietly. "Some kind of investment opportunity. He borrowed the money to get in on it, and then—" He trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. Another get-rich-quick scheme, another shortcut that had led to a dead end. How many times had we been here before? How many times had I bailed him out, telling myself it was the last time? "And you want me to give up graduate school so Adam doesn't have to face the consequences of his choices," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Dad flinched like I'd slapped him, but he didn't deny it. "It's not forever, Rachel. You can reapply next year, save up again. You're young. You have time." The casual dismissal of my dreams, my timeline, my carefully laid plans, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Young. I was young, so my dreams could wait. Adam was young too, but somehow his problems couldn't. I walked past Dad toward his study, needing a moment alone to collect my thoughts. The door was still ajar, and I could see the chaos of papers on his desk. Bills, bank statements, what looked like loan documents. The financial stress was written all over this room, in the overflowing trash can and the coffee-stained papers. As I stood in the doorway, trying to decide whether to say yes or no to this latest sacrifice, I noticed something white peeking out from under a stack of papers near the edge of the desk. Without thinking, I reached for it, and my world tilted on its axis. It was a receipt from Henderson Ford, dated 3 weeks ago. My hands trembled as I read the details. One brand new Ford F-150, fully loaded, purchased for $47,000. The buyer's name was listed as Adam Mitchell, my brother's full name. But what made my knees buckle was the payment method, a cashier's check drawn from an account I recognized, my college fund account. The account Dad had helped me set up when I was 18, the one we'd both contributed to over the years, the one that was supposed to secure my future. "Rachel?" Dad's voice came from behind me, and I heard his sharp intake of breath when he saw what I was holding. The receipt fluttered in my shaking hands as I turned to face him, and I saw my own shock reflected in his eyes. But there was something else there too. Guilt, resignation, the look of a man who'd been caught in a lie he'd been telling for weeks. "Sweetheart, I can explain," he started, but the words sounded hollow, rehearsed, like he'd been practicing this moment in his head. "You already spent my money," I whispered, the words barely audible over the roaring in my ears. "You spent my college fund on a truck for Adam." The receipt crumpled in my fist as the full scope of the betrayal hit me. There was no gambling debt, no dangerous people threatening my brother. There was just a spoiled man-child who'd wanted a new toy, and a father who'd stolen from his daughter to give it to him. The lies, the manipulation, the tears in Dad's eyes, it had all been theater, a performance designed to make me complicit in my own robbery. Dad's face crumpled, and he reached toward me with shaking hands. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he said, his voice breaking. Adam saw the truck on the lot, and he was so excited, Rachel. He said it would help him get a better job, that he needed reliable transportation. I thought I could replace the money before you needed it for school. I thought I had more time, as if stealing from me was acceptable as long as he could cover his tracks before I noticed. How long? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. How long have you been taking money from my account? Dad's silence was answer enough, but I needed to hear him say it. I needed him to own the full scope of what he'd done to me, to us, to any trust that had existed between us. Rachel, please let me explain, he started, but I cut him off with a look that could have frozen fire. How long? I repeated, each word sharp as broken glass. 2 years, he whispered, and I felt something inside me shatter completely. 2 years of theft, 2 years of lies, 2 years of me working extra shifts and skipping meals while my own father systematically dismantled my future. Small amounts at first, he continued, as if that made it better. Just to help Adam with rent, with his car payments on the old truck. I always put it back, Rachel. I always made sure the balance looked right when you checked. But I hadn't checked often, trusting him completely, believing that my money was safe in an account he had access to only for emergencies. The room spun around me as I calculated the damage. If he'd been taking money for 2 years, how much was actually left? How much of my sacrifice, my careful saving, my dreams had been funneled into Adam's endless needs? I stumbled toward Dad's computer, my fingers fumbling with the mouse as I pulled up the bank's website. What's the login? I demanded, and Dad's face went white. Rachel, maybe we should sit down and… What's the fucking login, Dad? I screamed, the profanity ripping from my throat like a primal scream. With shaking fingers, Dad typed in the username and password, and we both stared at the screen as my account balance loaded. $3,247.83. $3,000 left of the $30,000 I thought I had. $3,000 remaining from 8 years of saving, of sacrifice, of believing that my father was helping me build a future instead of systematically destroying it. I gripped the edge of the desk as the room tilted, as everything I thought I knew about my family, my father, my place in this world crumbled around me like a house of cards in a hurricane. You stole my entire future, I said, my voice eerily calm in the sudden silence. Dad was crying now, real tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort him, no familiar instinct to make this easier for everyone else. Rachel, please. I know how this looks, but I can fix this. I can get a loan. I can… His words bounced off me like rain on glass. How many times had I heard these same promises? How many times had I believed that this time would be different, that Adam would change, that Dad would finally see me as more than just a safety net for my brother's failures? I walked past him toward the living room, my legs moving on autopilot, while my mind reeled with the implications of what I'd discovered. Every conversation we'd had about my future, every time he'd praised my responsibility and maturity, every moment I'd felt proud of his approval, it had all been built on lies. He hadn't been proud of me. He'd been grooming me, conditioning me to accept less so Adam could have more. The family photos on the mantel seemed to mock me now. All those smiling pictures where I'd been so grateful to be included, never realizing I was just the supporting character in Adam's story. Where is he? I asked, turning back to face Dad. Where is Adam right now? Dad wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, looking older than I'd ever seen him. He's at Jenny's apartment across town. Rachel, he doesn't know about the college fund. He thinks I paid for the truck with my retirement money. Another lie, another layer of deception designed to protect Adam from the truth of what his selfishness had cost me. Even now, even caught red-handed, Dad was still shielding my brother from consequences. I grabbed my car keys from the coffee table, my movements sharp and decisive. Rachel, where are you going? Dad called after me, panic creeping into his voice. Don't do anything you'll regret, sweetheart. We can work this out as a family. Family. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. What kind of family steals from their own daughter? What kind of family builds one child's happiness on another child's sacrifice? I paused at the front door, my hand on the knob, and looked back at this man who'd raised me to be strong enough to survive his betrayal. I'm going to tell Adam the truth, I said, and Dad's face went white. I'm going to tell him exactly what his new truck cost me, And then I'm going to watch him decide whether he's man enough to make this right. Dad stumbled toward me, his hands outstretched like he could physically stop me from shattering the careful illusion he'd built. Rachel, please, think about what you're doing. Adam's fragile right now. He's been through so much. And what about what I've been through? I screamed, all my composure finally cracking. What about my dreams, my plans, my life? The drive to Jenny's apartment passed in a blur of rage and heartbreak. I'd spent 26 years being the good daughter, the understanding sister, the one who didn't need as much attention or support or love. I'd convinced myself that my strength was a gift, that my independence was something to be proud of. But now I saw it for what it really was, a survival mechanism, a way to cope with being systematically overlooked and undervalued by the people who were supposed to love me most. Jenny's apartment complex was one of those generic places that looked like every other complex in America. Beige buildings, small balconies, cars parked haphazardly in spaces too narrow for modern vehicles. I found Adam's shiny new truck immediately, its pristine paint job gleaming under the parking lot lights like a beacon of my stolen dreams. For a moment, I just stood there staring at it, this $47,000 monument to my father's betrayal and my brother's selfishness. Then I walked up to apartment 2B and knocked on the door. Adam answered, wearing a smile that died the moment he saw my face. Rachel, what are you doing here? I thought you were at Dad's. He looked good, relaxed, happy, unburdened by guilt or worry. Why would he feel guilty? As far as he knew, Dad had magically produced $47,000 for his truck without it costing anyone anything. We need to talk, I said, pushing past him into the apartment. Jenny was on the couch watching TV, and she looked between us with the uncomfortable expression of someone who sensed drama brewing. Actually, I said, my voice deadly calm, we all need to talk, because there's something about that beautiful new truck of yours that you don't know, Adam. Something that's going to change everything. It doesn't matter if you knew, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. What matters is what you do now. That truck sitting in the parking lot represents my entire future, Adam. My dreams, my plans, everything I've worked for since I was 18 years old. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse, real understanding of the impact his actions had on other people. What do you want me to do? He asked quietly. I'll do anything, Rachel. Anything to make this right. Jenny cleared her throat softly. Adam, you could return the truck, she said gently. It's only been 3 weeks. The dealership might take it back, especially if you explain the situation. Adam's face went pale at the suggestion, and I saw him glance toward the window where his precious truck was parked. This was the moment of truth. Would he choose his toy or his sister's future? Would he finally, for once in his life, put someone else's needs before his own wants? The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of 26 years of family dysfunction and misplaced priorities. The truck's not even paid off yet, Adam said slowly, and I felt a flicker of hope. Dad financed part of it through the dealership. If I return it now, we might lose some money, but he trailed off, running his hands through his hair. God, Rachel, I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. I've been such a selfish piece of shit my whole life, and I never even realized how much it was costing you. The profanity sounded strange coming from him. Adam had always been careful with his language around me, playing the role of the sweet little brother who needed protection. But this felt real, raw, honest in a way our relationship had never been. I'll call the dealership first thing Monday morning, he said, his voice gaining strength. I'll return the truck, pay whatever penalties they charge, and give you every penny that's left. It won't be the full amount, but it's a start. He stood up from the chair, pacing to the window to look down at the truck that had cost us both so much. And I'll get a job, a real job, not some get-rich-quick bullshit. I'll pay you back every dollar Dad stole, even if it takes me years. The words sounded good, but I'd heard promises from Adam before. The difference was, this time I wasn't going to make it easy for him to break them. I want it in writing, I said, and both Adam and Jenny looked surprised. A payment plan, a timeline, everything documented. And I want Dad to co-sign it so he's legally responsible if you default. Adam nodded eagerly, like he was grateful for the structure, for someone finally holding him accountable. Yes, absolutely. Whatever you want, Rachel. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I want to earn it back." He paused, looking directly at me for the first time since I'd arrived. "I want to be the brother you deserve to have all along." Jenny stood up from the couch, her face pale but determined. "I'll help however I can," she said quietly. "Adam's been staying here because he was afraid to face reality, but maybe it's time he did." She looked at my brother with a mixture of love and disappointment that I recognized all too well. "I've been enabling him too, haven't I? Making it easy for him to avoid responsibility." Her words hit me like a revelation. I wasn't the only one who'd been caught in the web of Adam's neediness. Even his girlfriend had been pulled into the pattern of protecting him from consequences. "This isn't your fault, Jenny," I said, meaning it. "You didn't know about the stolen money any more than Adam did. But you're right about one thing. He needs to face reality." I turned back to my brother, who was still staring out the window at his truck. "Adam, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about the money, though that's important. This is about 26 years of me being treated like my dreams matter less than your comfort." My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed through. "I need to know that you finally see me as a person, not just a safety net." Adam turned away from the window, tears streaming down his face again. "I do see you, Rachel. Maybe for the first time in my life. I really see you." He walked toward me, his movements hesitant, like he wasn't sure he had the right to approach. "I've been so fucking selfish, so blind to what my actions cost other people. I thought Dad just had endless money, that somehow my needs were being met without anyone else suffering." He stopped a few feet away from me, his hands shaking. "But you've been suffering my whole life, haven't you? Sacrificing pieces of yourself so I could have everything I wanted." The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow, and I had to sit down on Jenny's couch before my legs gave out. "Yes," I whispered, the admission feeling like pulling a knife from my chest. "I've been sacrificing for you since I was 8 years old and you were born. Every birthday where you got the bigger present, every Christmas where your gifts cost more than mine, every time Dad missed my events to attend yours." The words poured out of me like water from a broken dam. I told myself it was because you needed more, because I was stronger, because that's what big sisters do. But really, I was just invisible. "You were never invisible to me," Adam said, his voice breaking. "You were everything to me, Rachel. You were the one who taught me to ride a bike when Dad was too busy. You were the one who helped me with homework, who drove me to friends' houses, who covered for me when I screwed up." He sank into the chair across from me, his face crumpled with grief. "I just never thought about what it cost you. I never asked if you wanted to do those things, or if you had your own life to live." The realization seemed to hit him fresh, and he doubled over like he was in physical pain. Jenny moved to sit beside me on the couch, her presence comforting in a way I hadn't expected. "Adam's told me so many stories about you," she said softly. "How you were his hero growing up, how you always knew how to fix everything. But he never talked about what you wanted, what your dreams were." She looked at my brother with sad eyes. "I think he put you on such a pedestal that he forgot you were human, that you had needs too." Her words were gentle but accurate, and I saw Adam flinch as they hit their mark. "I want to know," Adam said suddenly, looking up at me with desperate eyes. "I want to know about your dreams, your plans, what graduate school means to you. I want to know everything I should have asked about years ago." The request caught me off guard. When was the last time someone in my family had asked about my aspirations? When was the last time anyone had shown genuine interest in my inner life, my hopes, my fears? "Tell me about the program you wanted to apply to," he continued. "Tell me what you were going to study, what you wanted to do with your life." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The question was so simple, so basic, yet no one in my family had ever asked it before. "Environmental law," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to study environmental law and work for the EPA or maybe a nonprofit that fights climate change. The words felt strange in my mouth, like speaking a foreign language I'd forgotten how to use. I've been passionate about environmental issues since high school, but I never talked about it at home because... I trailed off, realizing the truth as I spoke it. "Because no one ever asked," Adam finished, his voice hollow with understanding. Jesus Christ, Rachel. I don't even know what my own sister is passionate about. I don't know your favorite color, your favorite movie, what makes you happy or sad or angry. He stood up abruptly, pacing to the window again. I've been so focused on my own problems, my own wants, that I never bothered to learn who you actually are as a person. The self-recrimination in his voice was painful to hear, but also necessary. This was the conversation we should have had years ago, the reckoning that had been building since childhood. As I drove back to Dad's house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not the naive hope of my childhood, when I believed that being good enough would eventually earn me equal treatment, but a mature hope built on boundaries and consequences. Adam would return the truck, and we would see if his remorse translated into action. Dad would face the reality of what his favoritism had cost both his children, and I would finally stop sacrificing my dreams for a family that had never valued them. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in my life, I was driving toward a future that belonged entirely to me. No more being the understanding daughter, the sacrificial sister, the one who always gave up her piece of the pie. It was time to claim what was mine.